Okay, great. So welcome people that are watching our
Oh,
video.
everyone says host now. Milosh, I just added Milosh as host.
Oh yeah, I just see that. Everybody, it just
Okay,
flips. Okay.
good. Okay.
All right. So just everybody keep an eye. If somebody else joins and they're not a host, just flip them because everybody's got power. Um, all right. Let's see. We have our hack notes, which I'll pop in our handy dandy chat here. And we'll also see if the chat notes are retained. So that might be an improvement on Zoom. So with that said, we didn't have any other agenda items. I don't know if people are being shy, hopeful. Oh yeah, please sign in, folks. Thank you, Wayne. Or there just isn't anything else to talk about. Are there any other agenda items?
Yes, I've got one actually, which came up this morning, which is
Would you call it an actionable agenda item that we want to do first?
um,
Wasn't a trick question.
let me just add it to the
Okay. So since we're obviously just getting this thing started with this distribution regular call, um, I'm trying to use some of the things that I've worked on some other calls that have worked. They're certainly not perfect. We've generally sucked at not keeping notes in the other calls, and scanning a video isn't good. So one thing would be great if we can do a weekly volunteer of who takes notes, and we'll rotate. And if somebody's presenting, they're not really expected to take notes. So that would be thing one. Thing two would also be, I don't know how we got into things. If anybody's had experience in other calls that works really well, I've yet to find one perfect, but each one has got various pieces that work well. So if anybody's got a change in process or how we manage the meetings, that would be great to incorporate here as well. One of the things that we have been trying to do on the other calls, because there are bursts of conversations that people want to have, and then there goes a lull. But everybody is generally busy on a regular basis. So rather than assume everybody's got a block of an hour on their weekly schedule, we try to make sure the agenda items are posted several days before. And within a day or two before the meeting, if there's no agenda items, we'll actually proactively cancel so that people can know to free up their calendar. So the opposite is also true, that if you do have something you want to talk about, please put it on the agenda, and then we'll know to keep it. And then other people will know whether they care or not is important for that particular topic, so they might join or not. I have noticed on a couple other calls, depending on the topic, there'll all of a sudden be 30 people there at the top of the hour, which is, usually you'll have like 5 or 7 people. So we'll try to follow that process. All right. LibTrust. Just usually it would go in order, but I'm curious, is that a quick one or a long one?
Yeah, I think it's quite a quick one. So this was brought up this morning. So there's a dependency of distribution that I basically archived it this morning because no one's worked on it for a long time. It is a library for supporting V1 manifests, which distribution still supports. I believe Docker Hub is probably the only consumer of this code, and I would like to get rid of it because it's basically, at least I think it. So one thing I want to know is anyone else actually supporting anything, any kind of legacy manifest conversion code on their registry? I would like to get rid of it from Docker Hub, but we have some people using it, so it's a bit of a breaking change. But this code is one of the bits of that is only used for that and is very unmaintained, and no one cares about it because it was all it's the code that was designed before Notary for signing V1 images that it's lost in the mist of time and no one knows anything about it. It's kind of terrible in many ways because it just adds signatures that no one actually knows what the keys for those signatures actually are. They're mostly ephemeral. It's a bit pointless.
How would we know if it's in use on our registry? Is it something we have to explicitly enable?
I'm not actually. I'm fairly sure that you can't actually upload V1 manifest anymore, but to any registry, but I need to check.
That was the one I was going to get. We actually did get a bug recently that we weren't doing copying of V1 schemas in our import API. And I was also curious, what is the expectation for V1 support? We don't do any conversion, but we support moving within a repo and within a registry and across registries. And we somehow just didn't know to do anything with this V1 schema, so we actually got a bug open from a customer that complained that didn't copy it. What are people's expectations on V1 schemas at this point? Are we finally able to deprecate something?
I think from IBM side, we have some that are still in there, and we let people pull them. But yeah, we explicit. Well, I think it's actually just in the code now. We don't let people upload new ones. So yeah, I think my expectation would be that if it's in there as V1, I don't think we should have to proactively convert it. And I don't really see why you couldn't serve it, because I don't think that should be complicated. But yeah, I think any new ones.
Well, so I don't think you should serve it for. Well, we convert things to V1 for clients that don't understand V2, which is a horrendous. I mean, we had a discussion about this in OCI. Just maybe it was in December, I think, but I think is a horrendous thing to do. Because it's like it basically gives by default it gives someone something that's obsolete.
Yeah. Yeah,
and isn't what was pushed to the registry, so it's not.
Yeah, I think I could agree. I think the numbers are really small, but there is a very small amount of images that were pushed as V1 many, many years ago and haven't been deleted. And I don't know. I think with that case where you're not doing a conversion and it's stored as V1, you could give it back as V1. But yeah, I think I kind of agree on the conversion piece. Like, I don't think our official support statement supports Docker clients of a version that would want it in V1 anyway. So yeah.
I did catch someone pulling an image with an old Docker from like 6 years ago when I went through the other day. But
you said you caught them, like they're doing something wrong.
Well, they were.
This is actually happening quite regularly on Docker Hub. Some of the customers. Docker, they have some really outdated clients which they keep on using. So it's not that rare.
I'm trying to think what version of client you'd need to own that for V1. Is it like pre 1.9 or something like that? Pretty old, isn't it? It's like 4 years or something.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to drop support. I mean, part of the reason with this code is that it's notionally security code. And I notionally kind of, in theory, own it, but I just archived it the other day because I'm not really going to. Literally no one's touched it in 5 years, but it is notionally security code. I don't like having it around. I'd like to get it removed. I mean, we could. I mean, currently people won't. You have to generate a valid V1 signature for these images for clients to accept them, which is also stupid because then when the signatures are pointless.
I think it's a good way to push people to finally upgrade their ancient clients because, like, if it is some dependency which hasn't been touched in 5 years, I mean, I'm all for getting the registry slimmer. The better. So the more the better. And also, like, obviously, security issues.
Yeah, and just for a recent example, we deprecated Shima 1 pools on GitLab. No one's complained. So
That's good. Yeah, I think we should deprecate them on Hub, and then, I mean, it's like, I mean, yeah, we've got some old images, but maybe it was just, I mean, they're like, there's old official images and things like that from way back when, but we could just one time convert them or something. I don't know.
yeah, I'm curious. Things like manifest store getting, manifest enumerators, that kind of thing. Can we unmarshal if we're iterating over manifest? Can we unmarshal Shima 1 manifests without libtrust?
You'd have to. I mean, libtrust is the bit that checks the signatures on them. The signatures on them or generates signatures on them, basically. So I think Containerd checks the signatures directly without using libtrust. But I mean, the signatures are basically pointless because they're all generated from random keys that no one knows what they are. Like, no one really cares. We could just all agree to use one signature or something. I mean, it's a little bit pointless, and I wouldn't trust the security of it. It hasn't been updated. So, yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll try and deprecate it on Docker Hub because we're probably the user with the biggest problem here.
It seems like a good direction to me.
Would this be another one of those blog posts you want to have like a little co-authoring of like, hey, we as the community would like to penalize people that use old clients?
That person from Cisco who pulled Python with Docker 1.0. Thank you. You're going to have to upgrade it.
The wall of shame. You're using old clients that otherwise don't break, but we're going to shame you. Anyway, I think it sounds like there's problems. We don't have enough insight to how many people have it, quite frankly. It was kind of, when this bug came up, the engineering team just tried to fix it. It turned out to be an expensive fix, and we were trying to figure out like, wait, should we fix this? Like, what is the impact of it? So,
I'm really surprised at FHU because it's like, it seems. But then there were a bunch of clients that didn't upgrade for a long time, and Quay didn't have support for ages and things like that. So maybe it's, I guess it may be. Yeah, I guess we'll have to do some digging to find out.
Find out more information about what the image was and what the scenario was, because we didn't agree to take the fix yet because it had just because the number of regions and clouds, it became an expensive fix for us to do and test. So I'll go find out some more information on what we hit, and maybe if others can figure out like what's their thought on whether is the usage reasonable there for some reason we should protect it, or is it time to just cut the cord? Okay. Anything else on that one? All right, so the next was the artifact manifest. And I don't know who's been following it to know the history that's going on here. So there's an update as of like 10 minutes ago. Let me see how screen sharing works. Okay. Okay, I can see my own screen. That's interesting. Okay. All right, so this is in the OCI artifact repo, and it's poll number 27, and there's now fewer files because there's a bunch of examples and some imagery in there to represent it, but I'll go through it. I have to clean up some text because we made a change, but the main scenario that's come up is there's two main motivations. One, the original OCI artifacts approach to store. So I'm making an assumption people understand what we did with OCI artifacts. So maybe I should back up. We've all people that are here, I assume, have all built registry implementations that are pretty sizable in the set of complexity and the scenarios we support. Everything from being production resources with high reliability and availability, and then depending on the vendor, we all are adding lots of secure elements to it, whether it be double encryption for customers or VNet support or various different replication and availability zone support scenarios. When we were dealing with Helm a few years ago, we were trying to figure out, like, is there a better way for us to store Helm charts? It seemed pretty weird that we had to do a Git-based deployment in a production environment, because we just don't consider Git to be a production reliable resource. It's more development in the sense it's not geo-replicated. Doesn't have the same kind of reliability and availabilities, and VNets and all kinds of other things. So we went down this pathway, like, hey, should we add Helm support to ACR? So we added it as a unique feature to ACR, meaning we added AZ ACR commands for AZ CLI. And then as we were in the middle of Helm, CNAB started to become a thing. So like, all right, let's do an AZ ACR CNAB. Then Singularity became a thing, AZ ACR Singularity. And it quickly became a thing like, this is silly. We can't chase every project. If you look at a file system, the file system doesn't have APIs for Word, Excel, C#, Justin's file format. There's generic APIs. So we inverted the model around and said, well, the only way we can get the Helm client, the Singularity client, Terraform maybe, and others to add functionality for registries to leverage these environments is if we made this a standard that would work across all registries. So through a long journey, we basically were able to leverage the existing manifests that registries support to change, or basically the config object that's in a manifest. We agreed that if we can change the media type, of that descriptor, that that would be the differentiator. So if you look at files in a file system, you have a file extension, you can tell what they are. The file system doesn't care, it's just a dot something, but you can convey some meaning around that type, and you enabled a bunch of other scenarios. So we basically have been working with that, I don't know if I want to call it a hack, but that existing element that there is a manifest, there's a config object, and the media type inside the config object is how you determine the artifact type. And it's worked pretty well. We've got more implementations of artifacts that we actually know how to track. I hear about new ones all the time, from ML scenarios to proprietary scenarios to all kinds of others. One of the problems that we've had with them, in addition, this minor thing was just a minor thing because only the people implement artifact types need to know about the media type on the config object. But there's been other artifact types that have been more difficult to implement. So as we were doing Notary, the main requirement of Notary was, one of the main requirements of Notary is I must be able to add a signature to an object that's in a registry without changing anything to do with that object. I push the MySQL image to the registry. I've got the MySQL image here. It's got a manifest, it's got layers. I think I've got a manifest example here. So, and this is the config object for the digest. So there's a digest of this whole thing, and it's got layers, and and it's got a tag, because your deployment scripts are either deploying by the artifact name, MySQL :V8 or whatever it is, MySQL 8, or some use digest to do deployment. So that was a fundamental thing. We could not change the manifest itself. So what that means is I've got to be able to add a new artifact, like a signature, to the registry, which can be stored, the signature itself can be stored in the config object or the layer. That part's fine. But how do you link a signature to an image? And the basic model is the registries don't support this concept today. We played with ideas of using index, the image list, but the image list does not have a way to store blobs. All it is a way to reference other manifests. There's no way to store content in an index. And we explored a couple things about possibly adding the config object to the index, which would mean that indexes would be allowed to be different artifact types as well, which would be super cool. But we just kept on coming against limitation. And we also kept on getting in constant debates of, hey, the image format is being used by the image community for a certain set of things. Why are you jacking up that thing when you're trying to do something else? And then we get in constant debates of, is this an image? Is it not an image? So I think it was Derek McGowan and some others, but he was the one who kept on pointing out, why are we trying to fit it into the two manifests that already exist? Registries, by definition, you must support at least these two manifests, index and manifest. But it doesn't say anything about you can't support more. It was the same logic that says the config.media type must support the n numbers that are in the image spec, but it can support more. So that's how we added Helm, CNAB, Singularity, OPA, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of where we're at now is, what if we add a new manifest type to registries that had much more flexibility to it? So it isn't coupled to the image spec. It's tied to the artifact spec. We could argue it should be part of distribution, but I'm not ready to make that argument now. This is in the artifacts repo. And can we have a new schema that has very similar qualities to manifest and index, but allows us to store things like a Helm chart that it could absolutely be stored. And if I look at the new schema here, what you're seeing here is the media type is an OCI artifact manifest. So instead of OCI image, so it's OCI artifact. The layers collection is called blobs because this has been a long debate. They're not ordinal by definition. They can be, but they don't have to be. So it's really just a rename for simplicity. The other thing that we've done is we've lifted artifact type to be at the root. So instead of having to drill in the config.media type, the manifest config media type, to figure out this, the media type, we're decoupling it. So there's two benefits. One, at the root, we just know what the type is. And two, you can now share config schemas across different artifact types. People were doing that. They were using the image config format, but they were using it for a different artifact type, so they had to kind of redefine it. So now what we're saying is the config media type is completely independent. You don't need that doesn't do any definition. You can just say, hey, this thing is a notary v2 signature right at the root. So that's a minor thing. It's just lifting a property. The main difference is in this manifest collection. So in the notary v2 signature case, it stores the signature in a blob. It also has a config object. We may or may not need both. We're not really at that point yet, but another type might need to. So now the signature has a way to persist itself, but we also wanted a way that says when this signature is submitted to the registry, we want to say, by the way, this thing is signing the MySQL image. So that's what this manifest collection does. It actually provides a reverse lookup. And if I go back to the examples here, you'll see how this can be visualized, but this is just an example. So if I look at a repo listing today, there's the image. In this case, it's WordPress, but I'll change this to be MySQL to be the focus of this one. So I have a MySQL image here. Now, technically, the layers are here, but we don't show the layers because these layers are fundamental pieces of this object. There's no real interesting thing from a user perspective to show the layers. So we always collapse this and show, just the image. Likewise, if I'm pushing a signature or an SBOM to the registry, I don't really want to see those as independent objects either, because this is a signature for a specific digest, which is represented by this tag. So it doesn't really make sense for these to be shown in an equal ordering any more than the layers do. So what we want to be able to do is associate that image with the signature and the SBOM and maybe some future metadata, and say from a user's perspective, this is what they care about. They care about the image, whatever the artifact is, could be a CNAB, could be a Helm chart. And it may have one or more signatures, one or more SBOMs, and a whole bunch of metadata. What we did in the Notary V2 prototype, for what we call prototype 1, is we upload signatures as OCI artifacts as defined previously. And we hacked in another API that says link these two things together. So now I'm having to submit something to the registry and then call this other API, which hopefully gets called before the thing fails, and links the two together. It basically just links the two digests. Now, you could argue we already do this today with uploading blobs and then a manifest, and we do garbage collection to make sure those things happen concurrently. But it's a very weak definition to have that defined. And when I move this image within a registry, across repos for dev to stage to prod, or across registries, whether it be dev stage prod registries or Wabbit networks to Docker Hub to Acme rockets, you're always moving things. We always want to make sure these things come together. So this is basically the implementation to support just that. I could submit basically for the signature, I would upload the blob, I optionally upload a config, and then I upload this manifest. On registry processing, it obviously makes sure that the blobs exist. So that's just normal validation that we do. But would also make sure that this digest for the manifest reference also exists. And for the scope of this collection, it has to be in the same repo. Because the whole idea, back to this visualization, is the signature and the SBOM and the image, there's no reason for them to be across multiple repos. Those are a single entity that just continues to get improved by adding signatures, SBOMs, and other associated data to it. It could be a GPL license collection of source as well. So with that, I'm going to pause for conversation. Did I lose folks, lose interest? Any input? I'll come back over here.
Yeah, just trying to visualize it in my head at the moment. So just trying to visualize the flow from a client's perspective, right? So you do a pull, you find the image presumably at that point. Is the expectation in the future that the image would have, like, if a Docker client does a pull, right, and it's found the image and that's got its image manifest, what's the link for the client to go find the Notary V2 signature?
Yeah, so and this is the interesting part about the reverse lookup, right? So the premise is you're not actually querying on the signature or the SBOM. The premise is you're looking for the MySQL image and you want to know what enhancements had been added to it, like an SBOM or a signature. So there is a links API or a references API. I haven't, the naming is hard problem, so I'll ignore the name for the second. But basically you would say, hey, registry, what references do you have to this digest? And it would be on a repo. So I'd go to the MySQL repo. I do like _ references. I don't, again, whatever. Yeah. And it would say, give me everything that references this. Now, because this OCI artifact manifest was submitted, when it was submitted to the registry, and because it was linked to that manifest, an index entry was made in the registry. So it knows how to return it. Now, the scenarios on the client, it all depends. We assume that the Docker client would, the the Docker client would, if we did it right, support Notary v2, and it would have ability to configure what policies the Docker client supports for Notary v2, what certs it supports, and so forth. And the Docker client would follow the NV2 GitHub Notary project requirements. Let me just go to scenarios. This picture will help a little bit better. So I'll back up. So Wabbit Networks generates this net monitor software image. They ship it with a single signature, an SBOM, and GPL source. Let's just argument say. They ship it to Docker Hub. Docker Hub, because who the hell knows about Wabbit Networks, Docker Hub says, hey, this small vendor actually has good software. We attest to it. Docker Hub puts a second signature on it. They obviously don't change anything to do with the net monitor software image because it's an enhancement. The signature gets added. Acme Rockets pulls it into their environment because they don't want to be dependent on external source, external content. So they pull it in, they do their security scanning, they make sure it's good software. They only allow content to come in from Docker Hub with Docker Hub signatures. I'll ignore that, the validation for that for a minute. And then Acme Rockets adds its signature to it. So now there's 3 signatures on this thing. It goes into production. The container host, I think I just saw Derek come in here. So Containerd now adds support for Notary, and the Notary host has, the Containerd host has the public key for Acme Rockets, and there's a policy that says it will only deploy software that has the Acme Rocket signature. So what totally whitewashing an idea here. So basically the container host would say, all right, I'm configured with Notary v2. Let me go query the registry for that net monitor software by digest. Does it have any Notary signatures? Yes, it does. Does it have a Notary signature that matches the Acme Rockets key? Only if it does, and whatever other policies are set, does the Containerd host allow it to go through. Now, whether it's Containerd or an ingress controller or all those other kind of Kubernetes terms, the point is that the Docker client or the Containerd client can absolutely integrate with this. It's not integrating with the artifacts approach. It's saying, I support this specific scenario.
Yeah.
And the scenario here is Notary v2, and it says, I know how to query for Notary v2 signatures, and only if it finds them through this new list references API, would it allow it to continue?
Yeah, it's cool. It's that kind of in line with what the Red Hat simple signing does.
Exactly.
So yeah, so it's like the extensions API, and it just knows to say, hey, does this specific digest have any SIGs? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, cool.
So I guess this is a more sort of a more agnostic approach to that, where something, say Scopio, for example, needs only to be taught that I might have some artifacts that I also need to copy with this image, and it doesn't really care what their media type is. It just knows, look for the artifacts.
Exactly. So now you're seeing, so when we, to me, the success of any project is you lose track of all the customers you have. Right? If you know all your customers by name, you better be in a very customer intimate business because they're paying you a lot of money. Like a file system would never know all the different files that goes to it. When we built the artifacts approach, we never want to know all the types that go against it. The whole idea is that it needs to be really endlessly extensible. Notary v1, amongst many of the problems it had, is registries had to implement a pattern that only supported Notary v1 signatures. Our approach here is we want to be able to support these reference artifact types so that, yes, we will ship a Notary v2 signature format. And that'll be important. We hope that it's widely universally accepted. This way, you can get this thing that moves between clouds and everybody's just figuring out which public key that they're using. But we've seen Google has another signature solution that they've been working on. IBM has theirs. Somebody might come up with another one. Not only can we want to be able to support things like SBOMs and GPL source and other things that I hadn't even thought of when we first built this, but there's also the ability to support other signature types. So without the registries having to change the implementation.
I can see this is possibly a high quality way of implementing this, given that there's no way to add more blobs to a manifest that won't be treated as a layer by Docker clients.
Exactly. And that also means not only do the Docker clients have this backwards compatibility problem, it also means it only solves the Docker client problem or the Docker scenario. It doesn't solve signing Helm charts, signing CNAB, signing NIDIS, signing, OPA. There's the whole idea is I shouldn't have to build a specific solution for any one of these. How can we solve it in a generic way? And more importantly, because we're on this distribution group, all of you that are implementing distribution, by implementing this single pattern, we can leverage this infrastructure for any other types. Like we've already done experiments where we're using the ACR infrastructure to serve other package manager types. Because our customers are saying it's the same problems I have around container images I have around PyPy packages. So this allows us to store those kind of references. Curious for the registry operators here, what are you dealing with different types already? How are you dealing with it? Is this solve problems, add problems?
Yeah, I think from a ICR IBM perspective, we support the Helm stuff, but that's basically all client side, right? You kind of get that for free if you support OCI, because the Helm free client kind of does it in a way that just works using image formats at the moment. In terms of signature support, still running Notary V1 for its sins. I mean, we try and actively discourage people from picking it up. And the hope is that once the V2 stuff's out, we'll just officially deprecate it. And then the other thing we do on signatures is we support the Red Hat simple signing, the stuff that like Scopio and CIO support. But yeah, at the moment, that's kind of it. We're not doing any of the other artifact types at the moment. But yeah, something that we're keeping a keen eye on and would look to do, I think.
From what I've seen of things like the simple signing and even the one that Google did, that Dan presented the other day, is they basically everybody has to kind of hack around this lack of references. So like the cosign thing that Google did, and it's a total prototype. So he acknowledges the constraints. Like he basically just pushed another tag that has the digest name in the tag. So it winds up with this flat reference problem because a tag is a tag is a tag. Wait, where'd it go? Oh, I'm in the wrong one. And his answer is like that's a side effect. That was only what was available. So if we do this, then he doesn't have to do this total hacky workaround that he can get the benefit. I don't know enough around the IBM signing solution, but would this enable the IBM signing solution to persist itself in a cleaner way, or?
We've kind of gone vaguely similar, right? So it's more, the Red Hat stuff is basically the expectation from the Red Hat clients is it calls the registry and it's looking for a header that comes back saying we support the extension API for signing. And then under the covers, like your Scopios will call that API. For us, we kind of manage that by having a microservice that's not part of our distribution. So it's a separate microservice. And then, we store the SIGs in the same storage bucket as distribution users, and just like in an underscore signatures directory, which is kind of sort of in line with your idea of having an underscore references or whatever, but never the name was. And then, we can look up the signatures based off that. So it's kind of fairly aligned with where this is going. I think we could certainly swap that out. I think the issue would be the Red Hat clients all expect this extensions API to exist, so it'd have to be served off the correct API for that to all work. Is that true? Actually, I think you can be changing the header where you want them to go. So I think you can probably swap it out.
I think we could swap that separate microservice to be just a wrapper around the new way of storing things. So it calls back to registry v2 talking artifacts instead. And then we'd support the artifacts natively, and we'd support the extensions API through the wrapper of that other microservice.
Yeah, I certainly think we could move to the OCI defined model for it without breaking any customers, which is nice. I think we could all do it back end, which would be cool. Because I think ultimately it'd be all nice if we're doing this in the same way. So yeah.
Yeah, so the assumption is obviously some changes have to be made to go find the new one. But the main thing I'm trying to make sure is we don't lose some type of data, some type of information, some type of validation that you're needing. Because it sounds like you, like others, have either jacked things into a registry in a, some kind of way that it exists because it's there, or you had to build some kind of sidecar scenario. But is there something about the data storing, the authentication, the something that if I want to make sure there's no fidelity loss. Like we want to move the cheese, but we want all the cheese to be there.
From an auth perspective, because they treat it as an extension of the V2 API, it still goes around the same OAuth flow as a push and a pull. So as long as this is in distribution, that shouldn't change anything. I think the only thing would be potentially like the Red Hat clients, what format they expect the response back from. I think that's defined, and they expect a certain fields in the JSON, right? So if it was to move over wholesale, we'd probably have to look at the clients and see if they could be updated to support artifacts. Would probably be the way to do it. So get some buy-in from the guys who manage the Red Hat tools to change it over so they support it as well. But yeah, I don't see any massive blockers with it, to be honest. Seems good.
I think the only thing that's nagging me is how to handle the error cases. Say we lose storage halfway through doing a push of one of these artifacts, and I suppose you would create the artifact first, create the artifacts manifest first, and then update the main manifest with the link to it. So can it be made atomic in all situations?
The transactional boundary of how you reconcile all this stuff. Yeah, I think so. We all have this general garbage collection problem, right? Because you can where's my standard one? If I take just the image manifest that exists today, I can upload the blob. I might even be able to upload both layers, but my connection drops before the manifest can get uploaded. And if we find zombie blobs that don't have a manifest within a certain amount of time, our garbage collection comes in and cleans it up. You could go the not opposite, but continue down that path and say, in the garbage collection, not only do you want to make sure that these things all exist, you could also say, well, to your point, I got the blob for config, I got the blob for the blob, I got the manifest, but I guess at that point you actually got all the content, so the client can disconnect. And if your manifest didn't get linked, it's no different than any other index update that you have to make sure it gets, transactionally supported. So we actually do have an example so if we go to GitHub Notary distribution, if we go here, there is a pull request already that has this refer metadata store. It's completely hacked in, to be fair. Like, this is exactly what we wanted to be able to improve upon, but this is how we proved it would work. So we find the markdown file. I think I wrote up a good example. Go. Where's .md? Or maybe I put it somewhere else. Anyway, I have to find it. But because it's a prototype, it basically just stores a linkage, in a tree, because distribution is pretty flat storage on. I know I stored this somewhere. Hold on a second. I know where it is. In docs for distribution. I think I've got an entry in here that shows the linkage. No, maybe not. Okay. Anyway, yes. Basically, with while some will go to a more elaborate indexing and databases and whatever to do faster lookups on millions of artifacts in a registry, we want to make sure that we have a simple implementation with distribution that says under a repo for a digest, you'll be able to see not just the layers collection, but you'd see the links collection for it as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm stuck on me trying to find where we saved this example. Anyway, I can't find it right now. I'm working on a doc that talks about the notary status, and I'll elaborate all these details. Because if I can't find it, I don't expect anybody else to. So our hope is, that we're solving a problem that we're all feeling the pain for, and nobody's had the time to drill into all the details it takes to unravel this big furball. So we're hoping that all distribution implementations, not just distribution, but the OCI registry implementations would implement this because it's solving a problem we're all having. We're really looking to make sure we actually did capture all the problems. That's kind of like, Jack, what I was kind of poking at on you is yes, there's an assumption some of the APIs have to change because we moved the cheese, but we want to make sure there's nothing, even if you want to support a different signature format, that this new manifest format could support it. But even if the signature format is very similar to what you're doing, is there some other element to the signature? But that gets more into the notary. So from a distribution perspective, does anybody have any concerns about supporting a third manifest with the semantics?
How do you handle clients that have or haven't upgraded to support this?
Oh, great. So basically, because it's a new manifest, they don't know what they don't know. Like, we're not breaking anything existing. Let's just assume for a second, the Docker scenarios don't change. They're still going to use OCI image, OCI, index, and Docker index, Docker manifest list, with various images. When if the Docker client wants to support Notary v2, then it will know it's a new deployment because somebody says, I want to support Notary v2, and Docker says, hey, yeah, here's the client, go update to 2.4, whatever the number is. And in that, it will know to query the registry for, hey, I'm deploying the MySQL image with this digest. It'll call this new _references API. And the registry will either return I support that or I don't, right? The error codes. And as long as it supports it, it'll return back using this manifest, the collection of signatures it finds. So there's no breaking change to existing. It's totally an opt-in to new behavior.
I think the complicated part is whether or not you do any sort of writing back to the manifest format you have today. That was the challenge of moving to V2, the schema 2 from schema 1 is doing those back rewritings to the schema 1 format. So I think a decision has to be made whether or not you want to push up manifest in this new format and attempt to deliver them in an older format if a client is only requesting older formats, or return 404. That's kind of the tricky one, I think, from the registry perspective.
Well, so Derek, I'm curious. There's something about the way you said that implies that the image would be pushed with this manifest, and we're actually not saying that. This digest is actually, this notary signature is referring to an image manifest. So the MySQL image in this case doesn't change one iota. We're just adding a signature with this new schema.
Anything that the registry is not tagged, I think it should be fine. Clients won't be asking for that. But yeah, I think at some point you would expect maybe clients to want to represent any type or any artifact type this method, or to actually have tags that associate with this manifest.
Saying that the image format might change to this manifest?
This is just a manifest, it's not an image format. You could deliver an image in this way.
Well, in theory you could, yes, but it is a new manifest type, and we're not suggesting that the image flow change. That's part of like our design goals, is nothing about the image supply chain. The image workflow for people use today has to change. What we're saying is clients that are notary aware would know to query this new references API and ask for references back. So basically, if the changes first is on a registry would need to know how to process this new manifest. And when it sees this manifest being ingested and it sees a manifest reference, it would go to, in this case, the MySQL image and store a pointer to this digest of this manifest. So the registry does have an additive effect. There's no backfill, right? Because once this gets implemented, you'll now start accepting new manifests. When you receive it, you store on this digest, you store a reference to this, and now an older Docker client says, I just know how to call the image. A newer Docker client that's notary aware says, hey, registry _ references, what media types do you have for this? And it sounds like I need to document that flow a little more clearly.
Yeah, I don't know that all clients necessarily see it that way, as this is something that you cannot use for images, because you can use it for images. You're just saying you shouldn't. So yeah, you'd have to document it that way. But in general, you could tag one of these. So you would have to figure out the behavior.
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. So if I push this manifest to a registry, and even if I don't tag it, I can still pull it by digest, because this thing's going to have a digest, right? It's this right here. So if I pull this digest from a registry, a Docker client will get this manifest back and have to go, what the hell is this? That's a possible breaking change.
I don't think it's going to get it back, because it's not, the Docker client is going to request a very specific range of media types.
Oh, perfect. Then that's even better. So there's two scenarios that I think you're poking out. One is, what happens if a Docker client happens to call this thing because it doesn't know any better, and it should just filter out because it doesn't have a media type that it understands. The second is, if somebody uses a Scopio client, or Emoji, I don't think that supports this, but it's some other client that says, hey, I've got this collection of layers that happens to be a Docker image. Can I push it with this new manifest and store them as blobs? Yeah, you could, but the previous thing says that the Docker clients don't know how to pull this thing because it says this is not media types it support. If the image community wants to use this, by all means, great. There's nothing blocking them from using it from the manifest. I'm just saying that that's an opt-in thing from the image community. There's no requirement to use that. Very intentionally, is this is an enhancement to existing artifacts that are in existing images that are in a registry.
And so you said that there's a underscore reference or whatever namespace that's scoped to each repository.
So we're venturing into the listing conversation, which I don't have enough baked thought to have it written down yet. But the idea, what we did here with this NV2 client, is there is an API for querying references. I'm looking for where it is.
Because hard coding just one new namespace just seems like a mistake to me.
Hard coding one new namespace.
Basically, references has a single new namespace that you can now look up. And
the assumption is that, well, again, I'm not, it would be, well, I guess this would work. It would be references with an underscore. So Acme Rockets.io /MySQL /references, and then the digest of MySQL is the working thought. Because I can also say sub namespace one. Obviously, I didn't worry about spelling. That would, in theory, work, because underscore is a reserved character. And again, I'm not completely ready to have this conversation. If we're at this level of conversation, then I feel like, great, we've got past step one. But
well, I just having a single thing called underscore references seems like a bad extensibility design to me. It's like,
Great conversation.
why? I mean, we're just going to have to add more extensibility. Like, so I've got to go. Sorry, I've got to call.
Oh yeah, so we're at 8 o'clock. So I will wrap up here. So for those that have been following this, and Derek has been one that's been helping me a lot with this. Originally, I had another collection in here to support this references thing for Helm scenarios. We wound up all talking about that. That wasn't the main thing I was trying to communicate. I really wanted to get this manifest collection figured out for the back pointers. This thing here, our image has layers, but these things can point back. So I feel like we're at least talking about this, then I'm kind of making some progress. And if we're talking about the listing API, then it sounds like we're generally okay here. I'm sure there'll be more feedback, but like what's next? So if people are feeling good about this, that is the next conversation is, or how do I get these things back out of a registry? And if people are good with that, and this is a PR, please provide feedback. I will be working on that this week to maybe have something ready for next week's conversation.
Can you provide the links you're showing us now and you've shown throughout the talk in the agenda doc, just so I would really need to read through this.
Of course. It's in the hack notes. Basically, it's PR 27 on open containers artifacts. So it's in the hack notes.
So can I sign manifest list with non-V2?
So can you sign manifest list? Absolutely. So if you notice, if I go to the right page, this is just, where is it? This manifest collection is any manifest in the registry. You could sign a signature in theory.
But for the sub manifest, it is I mean for if I have a client to verify the signature, the sub manifest it is a sign or not for the client.
It depends on the artifact type. So for instance, and we're over, so people have to drop. We totally understand there is a recording, and I'm happy to cover this anytime you want. The scenario that we have here is, where do I have it? So I have a MySQL image. It's got two signatures, the MySQL image and the Docker community signature. It's also got an SBOM. The SBOM should be signed. So there would be another signature hanging off the bottom here. So there's a chain that you can walk at the level of depth that you configure.
Okay, gotcha.
Was that your question about the signing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. For the sake of time, if there's no other questions, we'll end here, and we'll work through the next challenges with Bevy on the host thing. Doesn't sound like a blocker at small teams. I'll talk to Amy and give her that feedback. And my next experiment, we'll see how this recording gets posted. So the HackMD doc will be the center point. So I'll put the link to the video there. And thanks for your patience. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Steve. See you later.